Hello, 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 everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Film Music House during the Sundance Film Festival. I am so excited to be launching off our series of keynote speakers today with an incredible composer who I'll introduce in just a moment. We have all sorts of discussions and panels and workshops going on here, so thank you so much for stopping by. With me today, I have the incredible composer, Jeff Beal. Jeff, why don't you hop on, say hi.
Hello, Chandler. How are you?
Well, I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much. A little bit about Jeff Beal. He's a five-time Emmy-winning contemporary composer for film, television, and the concert hall. Beal is primarily known for his award-winning music to the Netflix drama House of Cards, as well as scoring critically acclaimed documentaries at Sundance, including Blackfish, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power, The Price of Everything, and so much more. So you're our first composer, and I really wanted to invite you to be a part of this because other than Miriam Cutler, you're like the second person I think of when it comes to Sundance film composers, because I feel like you're at the festival every year I've gone. You're always on the BMI composer panel talking about your incredible work. And so I feel like you are Mr. Sundance to me. Um,
Wow. Thank you.
how many times have you attended the festival? And what was your impression the
Oof.
first time you went?
Well, this is actually a fun story because I thought I knew what the answer was and I remembered it was. I did many years ago. Probably going to be at least maybe 20 years ago. Before I did Pollock, even a television movie starring Helen Mirren, The Passion of Ayn Rand. It was for Showtime, and this was very unusual. Even it's not so usual now, but at the time it was kind of unusual that the festival would even take a premium cable movie. But this was, Helen Mirren and Eric Stoltz, and it was a cinematic thing. So I remember we went to it, and I remember sitting I just first had been there. We were sitting in the Eccles Theater, and we saw the movie, and the cast got up on the stage for Q&A, and I'll never forget somebody in the audience asked a question about the music, and I was, of course, sitting down in this seat. So he said, "Well, why don't you answer it?" So I stood up in the Eccles Theater, and but it's an amazing festival. I've been many times since then, but I think the first documentary I had at the festival was a film for Jessica Yu. In the Realms of the Unreal, a movie about Henry Darger. But it's an amazing collection of people. LA is sort of the center of our world in terms of the artistic, filmmaking community, but we never see each other. Like LA is not the type of city where you just run into people. And so I always looked at my time at Sundance. I know it's where I first met Miriam. Was at one of those the BMI very famous storied Zoom dinners. BMI Zoom dinner. So many happy memories and many great relationships. And of course, since then, I've also been a fellow at the labs with Peter Golub many years. And it's been really, I would say my most happy, thing I'm proudest of in terms of my involvement with the festival has not really been the music I've done, but it's been to see some of our fellows in the labs go on to have really amazing careers. Chris Bowers and just a huge, it's just the beginning of a very long list of people that have gone through this program and gone on to then start their careers.
Yeah, I think Laura Cartman actually was an early Sundance Composer Lab
Yes.
fellow as well. Like, it's incredible to think how long it's been going on and careers that have spawned out of it. Every time I hear a composer talk about that Composer Lab that Sundance hosts, is that they come away with incredible experiences and awesome stories.
Absolutely, and it's funny because I have a program at Eastman and I go and teach film music but it's this is a art form that really the doing of it is how you learn. So just this chance like a festival offers for people to be with each other, exchange ideas, talk about the problems they solve, the creative sort of journey is really what makes this film festival I think really special.
Absolutely. I just want to say to everybody that's tuning in that we will turn it over to audience Q&A. So in Zoom, which by the way, you said Zoom dinner, and of course my COVID brain thinks Zoom
Yeah.
like we're on right now.
Yeah.
But of course, Zoom, for those of you who might not know, it was a restaurant. It's no longer a restaurant there anymore. The building is there. It's called something different. But it was called
Yeah.
Zoom. And yeah, we would go to these incredible seat switching dinners where every course you'd sit at a different table and you'd get to meet all sorts of interesting people. And I definitely appreciate the way that during Ring of Ross and BMI set up that experience, because I met so many incredible filmmakers and composers and people in our community.
Absolutely. It's a family. It's kind of a small town. I mean, we're all over the world, but you get everybody in the room in a town, and it's really, really fun to see that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think Sundance means to the composing community? I mean, we talked about the labs. Do you see it like as a holy grail to have your work shown here? I think it's America's probably #1 festival, if you think about it.
Yeah, I think it is because, well, it's sort of, it has two things going for it. It has the first thing I said, which is a lot of people from our community are there, filmmakers all up and down the sort of food chain, from people making their first feature or very accomplished independent filmmakers come here and bring their work here. But of course the industry is watching too. I mean, because for years, probably since at least 20 years ago, this became the marketplace for independent film too. So this is where a lot of deals happen. So it not only is a great film festival for independent film, but because it is probably the premier marketplace for independent films. A lot of the premiere. I mean, when you do an independent movie, this is usually the top of your list. There are other great. I love South by Southwest. I love Triloka. I've had films at those festivals as well. But because of the way the calendar goes, it's Sundance, South by Southwest, Triloka, etc. It's sort of at the beginning of a calendar of premieres for independent films, and I think that's part of what makes it so exciting.
Absolutely. Tell me about the first time you discovered jazz.
Well, I started as a trumpet player very young, probably, I don't know, maybe third grade, something like that. And around middle school, it was in middle school that I graduated from, the band and trumpet lessons and all that. This is before Proposition 13. At least California's getting a little better, but at that point we had really good music in the schools in my hometown of Castro Valley, which, fun fact, you might not know this, but Rachel Maddow also went to my high school. She's quite a bit younger than me, but about 10 years. Yeah, just thought that's pretty cool. But no, it was a great town. It was, it's in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, wonderful suburban kind of East Bay part of the city. But I'll never forget middle school. I got in the jazz band. I loved the music. And then I started getting called on to do some improvised solos. And when that happened, I certainly didn't know anything about what I was doing, but I remember I got like the Jamie Aebersold kind of blue book, and I started figuring out, okay, blues scales, but it unlocked something inside me that was a creative voice that I didn't even know it was there, really, you know what I mean? But, improvisation, my grandmother was a real great improvising jazz piano player. I remember going to her house and she'd always be just jamming on the piano and playing stuff and laughing and singing. And it was like that gene, and I'm a big believer in DNA and music, but something came out of me and I was like, oh my God, this is like lightning in a bottle. I don't know what's happening, but this is fun. This is fun. And every young person, you hope you have one of those epiphanies. And that was the gateway drug into really I'd say my whole career. Everything, certainly what I'm doing now as a composer really is I can't imagine it being what it is if I hadn't first discovered jazz. I mean, improvising in jazz is really, it's spontaneous composition is what it is. So it's all the same things you're doing when you're writing. They're just much more fun and immediate, and they're social because you're playing in a band.
Yeah, would you say that the jazz background that you kind of grew up with and eventually studied and performed, does it really inform your film scores?
Absolutely. I mean, it's part of my voice, and it's a sensibility. Obviously, not everything. Very few of what I do, like the Ayn Rand was a really fun movie because that was a jazz score. But House of Cards had a little bit of noirish in it, but it's more about the sensibility, that spirit of improvisatory musical language. I love that way in which great jazz has on one level, a great jazz solo has this amazing sort of structure and logic. But there's always these great surprises that happen. And that's kind of what I look for, I try to do in film music. I mean, film music by definition should not always be predictable or repetitive in the sense that you know what's going to come next, right? So I think I try to channel that sensibility in my work. And like right now, for example, I mean, I'm doing like a new series, Walker, Texas Ranger, which is, you know, probably the furthest thing you could possibly think from House of Cards, but it's really fun because I'm trying to integrate this language of sort of, you know, Southwestern Austin, Texas, which is it's not just country, but it's a little bit of blues, but it's all these folk musics really. And so that there's something I love about jazz music too, is it's folk music. It comes from the blues. It comes from, you know, these traditions of music, which are not necessarily purely academic or cerebral. They're much more visceral. And so that's part of, I love that part of it too. I think there's something about jazz music, which is not, it's decidedly, I mean, it's very sophisticated music, but it's also not highbrow in a certain way, because it's got the spontaneity about it, which is really, really unique. And it's so very American. You know, this is what we do. We have this amazing confidence and you know, sort of extroverted spirit, I think, in who we are as a country.
Amazing. I was just thinking for composers that might be in the audience, interested about, you know, kind of building up their careers, breaking into the film and TV industry. Do you think having you know, a characteristic feature like jazz or a signature sound or something that you bring, some DNA that you bring to your music really is important in your career?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I think it is. I think it's really important. I mean, obviously, when film music is a form of literature. Cinema is a form of literature. So you want to learn that literature. But again, I think as a composer, I think you'll be a much more successful composer longer term, for not just a few years, but for decades, if you have, I think, a musical voice, a musical sort of backstory that is really unique, that it really is you. It really is your personality. And I feel like that's what makes a career really a longer term.
I totally agree. I do think people that have signature sounds really do stand out in the crowd. Well, tell me about the Beale Institute for Film Music and Contemporary Media. What is that exactly?
Yeah, well, this is, you know, my wife and I were both students at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, which that's where I met her, my wife Joan, and part of the reason I chose Eastman as a school was I was a classical trumpet player, a budding composer, both jazz and classical. And so I wanted to look for a school where I could sort of study all those things. And really, Eastman really, it was a pretty short list. It was, you know, Berkeley, New England Conservatory, Eastman at the time, and there's many more choices now. But long story short, there was a mentor of mine at school, Ray Wright, who sort of was an amazing teacher and musician himself, composer, who was really, he's the reason I'm a film composer for sure. Was also my mentor in jazz. And as the school went on, as we left, obviously, decades, the school kept on doing and producing amazing, great artists, as it still has. I mean, some of the people in our classes or near our classes look like Renee Fleming, amazing soprano, Kevin Putz, Pulitzer Prize-winning composer, Maria Schneider, amazing jazz writer. So just a really, it's like a Juilliard, but it's not a competition, but to me, it's the eclecticism of the school has always been its strength. Well, long story short, the school had evolved to a point with its jazz program where they really needed a dedicated film program. So about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Joan and I decided to make a gift and endow this institute. We named it the Beale Institute. It was really, I was just writing an email about it this morning, but it's really fun because not only did we make the donation, which helped fund the startup of the program, which is now Mark Waters, who's an amazing composer from Los Angeles, has moved out and we have a 2 years master's program. It's very small. It's about 5 or 6 students per year. And these folks are amazing. And part of the joy of being the name behind the institute is I'm very involved. I teach several times a year with these students. I give classes, I consult, gone back and done a lot of concerts there. It's just so much fun. And part of the reason we got excited about what was happening at the school and really was that even before we got involved in this way, of their own volition, the students at Eastman love film music. They wanted to play it. These are a bunch of, you know, classical musicians and conservatory kids, really. And so they actually started, which is still an ongoing concern, the Empire film and television. They have their own orchestra and a student orchestra that does film music. So I just felt like, this is it's a horrible time in art in general because of COVID. But if you look beyond that into the future and into the recent past, we're at a very exciting time, I think, in concert music, in the sense that, film music is really is being accepted in the concert hall. People are starting to realize this is really great music. It's certainly not only for score composers, for songwriters. This is the way that a lot of songwriters break their careers. They have a song placed on a hit TV show or in a movie, and a lot of those movies are Sundance movies, like Noah Baumbach or, Garden State, or, like think of any great indie movie that's come through Sundance, and there's probably a collection of amazing songs that have been a part of that movie. So yeah, that's just it's a long answer, but you can tell I'm excited about it. And it's really it's fun for me. Again, it kind of gets back to what I said about teaching, it's really, at a certain point, I think, in everybody's career, you want to sort of share some of the things you've learned and pass it on, and also see that fire get lit in other people. So that's been really, really fun for me.
That's wonderful. Would you say that, or I guess rather to rephrase it, have you seen a big change in the opinion of film music over years? You mentioned now it's being played in orchestra, and classical musicians are interested in it. Was it not that way before, or what do you?
Oh no, and it's still evolving, and I think there is certain, I think for 10 or 20 years ago, it was like, oh yeah, that's commercial, that's commerce, and we're art, and that's like to me that's like such a false wall, really. I mean, that what I always say, listen, if Mozart and Beethoven and Brahms were alive right now, they'd probably be doing what I do, or what Michael Giacchino does, or Thomas Newman does. I mean, this is our modern day temple of art and music. So I wouldn't say they wouldn't be writing a piece for the LA Philharmonic too. I mean, I think the composer of this millennium is really can transcend those two worlds. But the interesting thing about the concert world is, I think part of it was commercial. I mean, listen, they want to engage their audience with music. It's a great it can be a gateway drug to getting people excited, who maybe families could bring their kids who've never been to the symphony. Like, hey, let's go see, Harry Potter with a Fifth Symphony Orchestra. It might be the first experience they have with that music. And really it's just a way, for any art form to survive, it has to have its tentacles, not only in an ivory tower, but really in some sort of folk, common language tradition. And really that is cinema. Cinema is our world. I mean, certainly in COVID, it's how we're all surviving, is at least watching something on a screen. I miss a festival like Sundance where we could be in a theater and watch it together. I mean, I think that's part of what makes Sundance so special, is that excitement you feel in the room,
Yeah, especially being the first audience to see films like this. Can you imagine?
Napoleon Dynamite. We were at the festival that year, and oh man, it was electric. Just such a funny, great movie. I've seen several of those. I saw Dave Grohl's Sound City, and Dave was there, and it was like, oh man, it's just a tip of a big iceberg of amazing premieres I've seen here.
Yeah, I've seen some incredible films at the festival as well. You mentioned your wife, Joan, who I know is also a musician and vocalist, and you've used her voice on scores in the past. I just was curious, when do you decide to work together, and when do you decide not to work together?
Yeah, it's really, like she's had this amazing, successful career as a singer, as a studio singer. She's kind of semi-retired now. She, letting younger people have those opportunities, but she had an amazing career doing singing on, whenever there's a choir in a big movie, she was often in that choir, or contracted for Mark Isham and Chris Leonard and several other people. She was trained as she's an amazing operatic coloratura soprano, now a really dramatic soprano. So over the years, it's kind of like, hey, she's in the next room, right? So it's easy. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit it. It's fun to work with somebody that you love and you know so well. And really, the voice, I don't use voice all the time in my scores, and I'll tell you exactly why, Chandler. It's the human voice is like catnip for the ears. Like, you just, as soon as you hear a voice in a score, you go to that. And so I think you have to be very judicious about when a voice is used, but at the right time, there's nothing better and more powerful than a voice. I mean, and it was really fun. I think the last time in a film she sang for me was in House of Cards. She sort of became the dramatic operatic soprano that represented Robin Wright's character, Claire Underwood, sort of the Lady Macbeth character. But yeah, it's been really fun working with her, and she's actually a great writer and a great lyricist and librettist. Last year we had a premiere together. Right around about a year ago at Disney Hall, I wrote a new score for Sunrise, the FW Murnau classic silent film with the LA Master Chorale night, whole evening with soloist, choir, and orchestra. And Joan took the music and said all the text for me. It was really fun working with her in that way, and we're looking forward to some more collaborations in that area down the road, possibly as well.
Wonderful. Well, I want to remind the audience that if they have any questions, there's a Q&A prompt down in your little menu. So hit the Q&A, send me some questions. If not, I've got plenty, but I want to make sure you guys have the opportunity to ask. I will see it pop up. No worries. Well, speaking of voice, I know you just recently used choir in Athlete A. There was a track called We Have a Voice Now, and it's a beautiful choral arrangement with some strings, and yeah, it just really stood out to me as a wonderful piece. But I want to go back to 2013 with Blackfish, because Blackfish, it was a documentary. It went on to receive a BAFTA nomination, and I clearly remember watching it and thinking that it changed my opinion of what documentaries could be and what they are. Because this being 7 years ago, I wasn't very familiar with documentaries. To me, they just seemed very educational and boring. And then I watched Blackfish and I was like, oh my God, this is dramatic. This is intense. And the music was a big part of that. I mean, there was a huge dramatic element into the music. Also very beautiful. Like I think there's a track called Magnificent Creature that is just a simply gorgeous piece. I just wanted to know if you could go back and do you remember your approach to scoring it? And I also read that you recorded it in your home.
Yes, I love this. It's kind of a workflow thing too, but I have a home studio. I've done a lot of recording in there. There's a sort of a great room, and I've done. It's kind of painful to talk about it because I miss it, but I did all House of Cards in there. I've gotten. I think the biggest group we've ever had in there has 23 strings for a few different movies. I think for Rob Reiner's Shock and Awe, for George Gallo, we did a big string section in there. But yeah, Gabriella Cowperthwaite, who's sent me this, I sort of one of these random emails because I have a documentary, I've temped some music, can I send you a scene, right? And I had to sign an NDA before I could. She said, well, I was like, okay, nobody's going to hear it. And when I saw the scene, I kind of knew why, because obviously it was a very powerful statement about orcas in captivity. But the scene itself, Chandler, was riveting. It's the scene when one of the trainers is trapped. The whale pulls him down and he's trapped underwater for maybe 8 minutes. And I was just like, man, and my stomach was, it was like how you feel when you're watching a thriller or something. It was just and it's real life, of course, it's just terrifying. And I wrote her back and said, yeah, I'd love to do this. And I'm so glad I did. And I'm glad you mentioned that film, because I do remember talking to people who had just seen the film at Sundance, and so people, they said it kind of said what I just said. They said, wow, there was a visceral level in the film that got to people. There was also an emotional story, as you said, being told, and the combination of those two things, I think I learned something from that film too. Is I think a lot of times when you do a documentary, for example, you think, oh, we're doing something really good and it's worthwhile, it's important, but the idea that a film could actually change perception or policy in the way that I think this film did is that I hadn't seen that ever happen before. So of course, I'm proud of the work. What it did after we made the movie was pretty remarkable, and I certainly can't take credit for that, but it was really fun to see something you did go out into the world and affect so many people. It was really sort of humbling and special. It's really special in a way to see that happen.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I just got a question from the audience that I must have beat them to it. They were asking, did you know a lot about Blackfish, the film, before you decided to be the composer? So I guess the question could be, did you know much about the plight of
Well,
orcas or anything like that?
no, and it was really funny because I remember when I spotted the movie with Gabrielle, she was kind of looking at me and joking, and because she said, before these trainers, the story was brought to me. I think she said I brought my kids to SeaWorld, and we had done the exact same thing. Our son Henry, who was then, this was I think when he was probably maybe 8 or 9, that was a family trip. That's what you do. We went down to Legoland and saw the whale show,
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, listen, they're amazing creatures. And so that is an awesome thing to experience, right? That's great. But to realize, to see that story from the animal's point of view is something that it was really impossible to understand until that movie was made and you heard the trainers and you really learned what was happening and just how, listen, this is really relevant too. I mean, look at COVID, look at climate change, look at fire. I'm up here in Northern California where we had another horrible fire season. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, what's happening with a lot of things is now the planet is literally talking back to us and saying, enough already. This isn't working. Environmentally, this isn't working. Carbon isn't working. We think we're so modern and sophisticated, but as we expand and encroach into areas that maybe that humans have never gone to, these crazy viruses can come out. So there is sort of a hubris, I think, which we have had as a race, as a species, on this giant ball, which is, this is a horrible time, a tragic time, but is possibly a very necessary awakening that's happening right now. Mm-hmm. And we can only hope, and I do hope that important lessons will be learned from this, and we will hopefully emerge wiser and more appreciative and more sensitive to the balance of us and the rest of nature. You mentioned Inconvenient Sequel. It's hard for me to say what I just said and not think of, first of all, meeting Al Gore, which was really such a thrill, and what a genuinely passionate activist he has become post-political life. But there's a great scene in Inconvenient Sequel where he talks about a picture that was in his office, and it was the blue globe, it was something, but I forget the exact name of it. It was one of the first pictures of the Earth taken from the Apollo, one of the Apollo rockets. And what he loved about that is this perspective of it. Nobody had ever seen the Earth as somebody from space seen. Like, it's not a bunch of countries. It's not just us, but it's this beautiful magical orb floating out in space somewhere. And it's very precious, and it's finite, and it's kind of magical, and we are the stewards of that.
Absolutely. And I think some of the powerful things that are happening with documentaries is documentary series that are happening. A lot of the nature series that you're seeing, David Attenborough, of course, and whatnot, they're really delivering a message in episodic format, which I think some people need. they don't want to sit down and watch a movie, but they can be told about information in an episodic format, and I think that message is getting out in a wonderful way. Some other questions from the audience. What was your favorite project that debuted at Sundance, and why?
Wow. Oh man, I'd have to look for my IMDb list. Let me see here. Favorite project.
Queen of Versailles.
Oh man.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah. No. Well, you know what? In a way, it is. I think it is kind of Queen of Versailles. Because, well, I'll tell you why. Because that film was chosen to open the festival, which is a huge honor. Mm-hmm. And so I remember Eccles. It's not often, as you know, if any of the Sundance knows, that a documentary premieres in the Eccles Theater.
True.
So we had opening night of Sundance and Eccles premiere. And I'm also so proud of the film that Lauren Greenfield made. I mean, it was like, this is what makes documentaries so great, is the way there's a chance, there's a risk every filmmaker takes, right? Lauren had, as a sort of project, and now I was very proud of it. We had another film here several years ago. Generation Wealth was a little more of a follow-up to that. But Jackie Siegel was really just a subject of hers because she was really fascinated with the whole idea of wealth, and if she was with this family in Florida, of course, and this is right around 2008. They're building a 100,000 square foot house in Florida, and all of a sudden the real estate market, just bottom falls out, and so the biggest house in America, is a big metaphor for overreach, goes into foreclosure basically. And so the way that she captured these people, and we, again, it's really a really cool film. And what's funny about it, I'll tell you, in context of music, of course, which is what we're talking about, right? I remember in an early cut she showed me, you could watch that film and without any music, and it works totally, but it was much more like Grey Gardens or something, very verite. Mm-hmm. And I was really happy that in working with Lauren and our picture editor, Victor Livingston, great documentary, really great editor, is that we really decided that we could really be hands-on with this music. We wanted the music to be a character in this movie. And so that, of course, I'm really, really proud of that score and the way it sort of gave the story a life. It gave it a heart. It gave it the kind of over-the-top irony that something like that needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a while since I've seen the film, but I remember there was a lot of waltz, or it's very fairy tale music in a way.
Yeah, and it's really funny because DNA wise, I'm very dramatic. My family, loves that musical genre, and I do remember that was, I don't know if that was my first waltz, but if you look back in my work, there's a lot of waltzes in scores. There's also one in Last Call at the Oasis, a film I did for Jessica Yu. And gosh, I'm trying to think I wrote a lot of waltzes in House of Cards. They were much more dark and brooding, but what I love about the waltz, it's a dance form, mm-hmm. And so there's an elegance to a waltz. There's also something very European about it, which I love because I love European music. So yeah, it's just, again, that's part of what was fun about doing the movie, is that there was the subject matter, this sort of aspiration towards European elegance, had this sort of musical language already kind of baked into it.
Yeah. Now, has any of your waltzes ever been like commissioned for a dance company, or not commissioned, but I guess licensed?
Funny you should ask. Did you know what the answer to the question this was before you asked it? Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, there's a wonderful choreographer, Helen Pickett, who's done many, many ballets. And she and I met maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And she loved the music I did, The Last Call of the Oasis, which was this film for Jessica Yu. And I think that might have been the first waltz for a documentary ever done, because if you watch the main titles to Last Call at the Oasis, it's a waltz. Long story short, Helen loved that score, and we developed a ballet for the Smulen Ballet in San Francisco based on Last Call at the Oasis. And of course, one of the movements in the Oasis ballet is the big waltz theme. So yeah, it was very fun.
That's got to be so fun to do something for one thing and then be called up and being like, I really want you to do it for live dancers.
I love it. And I'd never written, I'm kind of coming late to dance, but I really hope to do more of it, because every time I've worked with choreographers, it's a lot like doing a film, but it's a little different because on a film, you're kind of like the last person. So everybody else gets to see their movie become even that much better by the addition of music. In ballet, it's kind of like the reverse. You write the music first, but then you get to see the choreography and the costumes and the set. So all of a sudden, my music sounds better, not by by what everything else that's happening with it. So it's almost like a movie gets made around your score. You get to see the creativity of all these other people interpreting, your music visually and in movement. It's beautiful. It's kind of what I love about choral music too. I think dance it's like the body is an instrument in a way. So it's got this sort of visceral poetry that's just, there's no barrier, it's what I love about jazz too. It's like there's no artificial barrier between the performer and the work.
Now, just a couple of questions from the audience I want to get through before we reach the end. One is, what is your favorite Sundance memory?
Probably, this is going to be probably skiing.
Okay, well, hey, that's fair.
I love to snow ski. And so I never get to do it though. I'm usually the time when you could go out and run away and ski, you're busy. This is like when we're busiest working. So, and if you like to ski, the best time to ski in Park City is Sundance because nobody's on the slopes. Everybody's watching movies. So I remember probably my favorite memory, and it's really part of a larger memory, which is that I think this was my peak Sundance moment in my career. I think I had 3 films in Sundance, and also a film in Slamdance. So it was I was a 4P, and I think this might have been the Blackfish year. I can't remember, but so I stayed like more than a week, and it was amazing. And all these great parties, all these great films, and at least a couple days of really amazing skiing. So,
I love that. I don't know how to ski personally, but it looks beautiful every time I see people do it. It's
athletic, and but you're in your nature, and it's not fun when there's a lot of people up there though, because you're just kind of like worried about getting hit. There's something magical when you're on the mountain and there's just a few people, because then you feel like you're in this mystical winter paradise kind of. It's pretty cool.
Amazing.
And you're not cold because you're kind of like working. So you got all this stuff on. If it's not snowing out, it's sunny, and you're in snow, and you're just kind of gliding down a mountain, hopefully not falling too much. I'm not great. I'm like a decent intermediate skier. So anyways, there you go.
Next question is, what does success mean for you?
That's a loaded question. I guess the main thing that I'm grateful for is I get to do what I love to do. I mean, there's so many, like, this is, I never feel like I'm going to work because I do it even if they didn't pay me. It's like, this is what gets me out of bed in the morning. So the fact that I have the opportunity to do it and work with so many great artists, really, to me, that's the reward. Yeah.
And the last question out of the audience is, which of your scores is your personal favorite and why?
It's hard to single one out, but I'm very proud of House of Cards. That score has meant a lot to me. But really, I'd have to say probably Pollock for Ed Harris, because I feel like it was early in my career. It was a huge opportunity, and I felt like it really is this film and the score that it really got me noticed, by HBO and a lot of other people. And it was a great experience working with Ed Harris, and I just think it's a remarkable movie. So if I had to pick one, that'd probably be the one.
Great. Well, that wraps up our time. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this keynote Q&A with us at Film Music House during Sundance. For those of you watching, coming up on Saturday, we have Michael Dana. So tune in for Michael.
Tell him hi for me.
I will.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you, Jeff, for being here.
My pleasure, Chandler.
It was lovely. Have a wonderful evening.